Welcome to the Busy Fit Podcast, episode 28. If you listen to episode 27 is hosted by Aaron Duvall, and he and John Abatoy, our success coach, dove into what did you guys dive into? Stuff.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff. It was a good conversation.
Dude, what did we talk about? It was about like taking like theory and practice of training like elite athletes and like
Applying it to the general
generalizing
population.
it to like, yeah.
I was like, man, that's a really good episode. And then I was creating like the caption for it and like the title, and I was like, what are we?
Hey, well, then I'm blaming it's pressure on your mind. That was like a whole week ago for me. That was like a whole minute ago for you.
Yeah. Well, and how rare is it that we're recording episode 28, but episode 27 hasn't even come out yet? That like never happens.
Oh, nice. It's good.
Yeah, we gotta stay on that game. So today, anyways, before we get too sidetracked and like spend our time kind of talking about nothing, today we're going to talk about a pretty important subject for both us, a lot of our clients, and also people that have been through similar experiences as us, and basically just about ex-college athletes and kind of just their experience transitioning from being that 20-hour week, really dedicated athlete to being, which I don't know if this term is like acceptable to say. Tell me if it's not, but or if you know what it means. Have you ever heard of the term NARP?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, NARP. Non-athlete regular person. I don't know if regular people know that athletes call like non-athletes NARPs.
That's actually a good question. Now I feel like I need to go ask like other NARP friends, like, hey, do you know what, like if I called you a NARP, do you know why you're a NARP? I'm gonna go do some field research on that coming soon.
I am very curious. I wish we could do like a study or like a poll. Just put it out there, like, hey, like non-college athletes, do you know what a NARP is? And just put it out there and see who would know.
Worth the research.
Yeah. So talking about basically that ex-college athlete, how they became a regular person, just like going out of that normal, super strict life into just kind of figuring out how to be healthy and I guess normal. There's no really better word to put it. So I guess just, we'll start off with Aaron. What do you think kind of like the common experiences that people go through as they finish up as an athlete and they transition to a normal lifestyle?
Yeah, I think you mentioned, I was in college, I was a fake athlete. I was like in between the NARP and an actual athlete. I was just a club athlete. So like yeah, not quite as structured, a lot more leniency. So I feel like I've kind of maintained that like middle status just throughout. But working with athletes though, working with teams especially that you mentioned 20 hours. Like in college athletics, we have during certain points of the year we have 20 hours of the week where we can essentially mandate some sort of activity for our athletes. And people, I think what people don't really think about is like they hear that and like, oh, 20 hours. Wow, it's like 20 hours of practice. That's a lot. But that's not everything. Like you take those 20 hours of practicing and meetings and just that, but it's also being structured around like your class schedule. Like you are a student athlete, a college athlete. That's also being structured around training times for recovery, time in the training room. It's also being structured around study hall and other outside of the class, other academic things you have. And essentially, if you look at like what a schedule that an athlete has, within that 20 hours each week and the other X amount of hours that I can't do math, but the rest of the week. And it's like you look at like their daily schedule and like everything from the time that they wake up and eat breakfast to the time that they finish studying and go to bed, like everything is very clearly laid out for them. Like here, like this is what you need to do. This is your schedule. This is when you have class. This is the time window where you have to eat. This is when you go to practice. This is when you're going to meet with the coaches or whatever. And that's their life. And I think we talk about like the challenges that a lot of athletes encounter once they finish college is yes, there's still going to be structure. Like, ideally or theoretically, you finish competing, you go and you get a job, and done with that. So you have like your work day scheduled for you, but not everything's being planned out for you. Like you don't have a dietitian in your ear saying, this is what you should be eating for breakfast, and this is what you need right now before you go into practice. And you don't have a strength coach saying, hey, this is what you need to do in the weight room for your training. Like, so you're not being spoon fed this schedule and structure. And in a lot of ways, that's a good thing because like being a college athlete can be overwhelming. And it is like, I make it sound like it's easy, like, oh, everyone tells you what to do and you don't have to worry about it. But like what you're having to do is insane, um, especially for certain sports. And so, but going from that period of your life where you're spending 4 or 5 years with just again everything being thrown at you. Here's what you do. Here's what you eat. Here's where you go. Here's when you go to sleep, and here's when you can go to the bathroom. So like, holy crap! Like I'm a real person now. I'm a narc, a regular person, and now I'm in the life of like you kind of have to create that structure for yourself. I think that's one thing that people don't really talk enough about in that transition from like college athletics to what I'll call the real world. And so like what they do with their time, how they allocate their free time, like how they structure, like how they eat and how they train. um, That kind of, bleeds into the next one is like, again, like not just from the aspect of like your whole schedule kind of being structured for you, but when it comes to like your activity and your training, again, you have a strength coach, you have a sport coach telling you this is what you need to do to optimize performance, so you can compete really well whatever your respective sport is. When you're done competing in that respective sport, like yes, you can take a lot of those same principles of training and apply it to like, okay, well, I'm familiar with this, and this is kind of what I did in college, and that can sustain you for a long enough period of time. But eventually, it's like it gets hard to not again be spoon fed that structure of okay, well, here's what you do from a training perspective as well. You know, the goals, whether we like it or not, it transitions from okay, I need to compete at my absolute peak performance at this time of year or this period of the year to like I want to not ache when I get out of bed and I want to be able to play with my kids and not get tired. And those goals, those performance goals, like really, really change. So the training and that structure of training probably needs to change too. So, yeah, going back to the original question, long-winded way of saying like, the structure around just life in general and the structure around training and nutrition, where you go through this time period where a lot's being thrown at you and you're being told what to do by like experienced and educated practitioners to you can maybe kind of be just on your own. And again, you may have learned a lot along the way and could take a lot of those principles, but it's not may not be sustainable. 10 years after you finish being a college athlete. And again, those goals are going to change as well. It's not I want to go to the Olympics. It's like I want to go for a run around the neighborhood and not be gasping and heaving for air. It's an unfortunate reality. And I think that um, it's tough. A lot of people put a lot of their identity in who they are as this type of athlete or for whatever sport that they may be playing. And when you take that part of their life, not take it away from them, but take it away in a certain context where they're just not competing at as high of a level as they are in college. Like that's tough. Um, it's not all bad. Again, like there's a lot more free time. Uh, there's freedom with not being a college athlete and things that you could do, and you're not you can make your own decisions rather than everyone else and coaches making decisions for you. But there's definitely a lot of challenges that come with it too. That I don't think we really talk about enough in the college environment in particular.
You have all these people telling you exactly how to operate and how to run your day, and then all of a sudden, it's like you get to make all these decisions for yourself. And also like you're used to, we talk about 20 hours, but we know it's so much more than that. But combined between time with athletic trainers, eating, like preparing for practice, going to and from practice, like needing naps because you're training so much and all of that, to like, okay, now I just want to be like healthy, fit, and confident. It's like, where do you even draw the line if you're used to 20 hours with plus all that commitment? Like a normal training schedule or like a normal just like working out 3, 4 days a week, you're going to feel like you're not doing enough. And I think that's, we talked a little bit about CrossFit before, right? But like that ends up being a common sport for ex athletes to get into because they get to like fill that need of being addicted to it and like getting this, schedule where they're going sometimes twice a day just to go to like an open gym and then to a class and all this other stuff. Just because where do you even begin to think about like balance or what's normal when you've never had normal in your entire life?
Yeah, well, and just like replicating that like competition environment, that team environment, and again in that aspect, like I think things like CrossFit are great to almost kind of bridge that gap, like somewhere between peak level college athlete to old fart in their 70s, like or 80s, like you know, it's there's a big bridge there, but like something like that people could sustain for a long period, like I think it's great.
How many people do you feel like struggle to stay active or stay motivated when they go from having that support of a coach or a team or teammates or that environment to having nothing? Like, they finish that last competition, they have that maybe short period where they're still with a bunch of their teammates through graduation, and then all of a sudden it's like everyone scatters everywhere and you're completely on your own. Some people feel like struggle with that transition, or what do you feel like are the common things that people go through in that period?
Yeah, I wish I could pull like objective numbers out and say like, this percent of athletes say this or that. And um, I just I wish on the more like psychological side there was more research out there on like what those kind of effects truly are. I think, anecdotally it's easy to say like, okay, it's a hard transition when like you've been in a sport all your life and you've been told to do this and taken through everything, and then then you're just done with it. And or unless you go into coaching for that sport and then the role is flipped. But like, uh, yeah, it's the psychological, I don't know, toll, if that's the right word, but just the difference that really has on athletes. I mean, this has got to be significant. And again, I wish I could relate a little bit better, but being a club athlete in weightlifting, where my quote unquote sport was just lifting weights a couple hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. And then after college, and I became a strength coach, and now I just live in weight room still. So it's not like I was that much different. Like talking about numbers though, and I guess like certain challenges that athletes do face once they finish that period of time though. So one study that happened is probably 10, 15 years ago, and this sounds pretty general, also kind of obvious. They did a survey with several hundred college or ex-college athletes on uh, like how, I guess, essentially how happy were they with like their current like fitness, strength, body image, body composition. I think it was 2 years after they finished uh, competing in whatever sport they were in. Uh, between 2 and 4 years, I think it was, and 55%, so majority, 55% of ex-college athletes within a span of 2 to 4 years had subjectively graded in some way that they were not happy or they were not satisfied with their just like general physical body image, whether that was like their actual physical ability, like their fitness level, or it was like, again, more image related of just like body composition. So again, within 2 to 4 years, you're saying that the majority of ex-college athletes are saying that, I'm really not too pleased with like where I'm at or how I feel, because they do take that kind of decline. And that in and of itself too has to take some sort of a psychological toll too, right? That we don't really talk about. And I think the good side of that is that honestly, I think it's great that almost half, like 45% of those athletes are still saying, even up to 4 years after they're done competing at a high level, are still saying, like, honestly, no, like, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. Feeling good, looking good. But I think as you go longer and longer away and down that timeline, like that 55% gradually increases, right? So that's another area that I really think we talk about enough. But like the reality is too, to kind of combat that. Like I'm not going to say like it's as simple as A, B, C, one, two, three. Oh, well, here's your blueprint on how to be, super thrilled with how you look and feel after you're done being a college athlete. But if we're trying to oversimplify it, like I think first step is really just like make sure that you're developing a plan first and foremost. Like there has to be some level of like disciplined structure to saying like, rather than just like throwing shit at a wall to see what sticks and like, oh, I'm gonna ride my bike today and 2 weeks later, oh, there's a gym at my apartment. I'm gonna go max out on two random lifts and like I'm not saying that like not like that's better than doing nothing or not better than doing nothing. But I think having some sort of a system where, like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym this many days a week. It could be whatever. It could be CrossFit. It could be Orange Theory. It could be go to a park near you, go for a run. And, you know, again, just having a system. It doesn't mean that, like, you're going to have the same outputs and you're going to be building and, building muscle and getting as strong as you were in college, or that you're running enough or swimming enough that you're keeping that level of fitness that you had in college. But I guarantee that of that 55% of athletes that are saying that they're not satisfied or pleased with like general like physical appearance or performance, that at least they are. It doesn't mean that they're like, oh, well, I'm, running a few times a week and lifting a couple times a week. So I feel I'm good. Now I'm definitely satisfied. But I at least think that the psychological component of that is going to be very well combated rather than if you're going down, you're 2, 4 years away from being a college athlete. You look back and you're like, damn, I didn't do anything for these 2 to 4 years, put on 30, 40 pounds, I feel out of shape. Um, I think that takes a much bigger toll than like you look 2 to 4 years down the road. Like I gained 10 pounds, but like I can still like I can whoop one of the previous narcs in a race right now if I wanted to, and still got a little bit in here, whatever it may be. I think having that uh, maintenance uh, at the very least to whatever capacity is reasonable for that ex athlete is super super important. I not to like shamelessly plug us, but I also think, and it doesn't have to be us, but like there's a lot of resources out there for people that like want to specialize in working with populations that are like ex athletes, because the reality is ex athletes, and we keep saying college, it could be high school athlete too. Like, and some people compete at a really high level in high school, but those athletes in that genre, like clientele and personnel, generally have like a really, really good base to work with. So like it makes a coach's job easier when I know like, okay, you move well, you're already fit, you're already strong, you already have this great foundation that like we have the tools in our toolbox. So let's capitalize on that, get you feeling better than you ever have. Right? You hear the term like, oh, if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's super cliche, but I think there's also some truth in that too. Like again, those athletes that have that really good foundation physically, from a discipline standpoint, like everything else, like it's easier for them to come up with that system, like what their training structure might look like, or coming up with some sort of a plan than it would be for someone who's never had that kind of experience or plan before too. So I do think that ex athletes obviously do have the upper hand or the advantage in that respect, because they can, they have a better base and a better foundation to work
And they definitely do have a better base to kind of build off of. But but also I think there's the perspective of, we talk about like myths in fitness and in health all the time, but there's almost a myth there that we have to break with ex college athletes or ex athletes in general, where it's like you don't need 20 hours a week to look the way you used to look. Now, obviously, like the standard of wanting to look like you did in college when you're training, like more than, I mean, realistically, like you're training like an Olympian, right? Like that's the level of commitment it takes to have that expectation as far as like how you're going to look forever is unrealistic, but that's what you're always going to compare yourself to until you develop that, you know, I guess better healthy body image to start with. But, you can be incredibly fit training a quarter of that time. Like you don't need the 20 hours a week. And so when we work with those ex college athletes, like they almost get excited when we present something to them. We're like, oh, like you're telling me I have to work out like 3 to 4 hours a week, and that's like pushing it, and that's good. That's amazing. But there's even times where they'll do the 3 to 4 hours a week, and they're like itching to do more, or like do extra cardio or whatever. And it's like you don't really have to do that forever. But and some of them like I guess I'm curious your take on this. I think we've talked about it a little bit in the past, and something that I'm going through right now because I obviously was like high school swimmer, college swimmer, went straight into coaching where I was an assistant coach for a year and then just thrown into a head coach role. So like I just went through like that same schedule on and then on steroids, like coaching and doing it all by myself, then going D1. Whereas like I guess if you look back, I think it'd probably be 15, 16 years of just straight being in that athlete lifestyle, not necessarily training as an athlete, but having to be there at 5 a.m. till, 5, 6 at night. I did my lab work recently with our team and noticed like I have an insane amount of adrenal fatigue that's like built up over years. And I thought I was doing great. I'm 2 years removed from that lifestyle and got the lab work in there. And they're like, yeah, like your adrenal fatigue is insane. And that's just for me. They're like, yeah, you need to sleep. Like you gotta like drink less caffeine, which I already drink way less. But I'm going through this transition where it's like I have to heal my body for a long period of time. How many? And I guess I'm saying how many because it's not necessarily about that. But do you think that that's something that college athletes go through on a regular basis? Because you know that most of them are not getting more than 5, 6 hours a night when you throw schoolwork and everything else they do and social commitments on top of that athletic schedule. Like how many people do you feel like just need a period of just letting their bodies heal and like get actual sleep and function like a normal person, versus just being able to like come straight out of that athlete life and feel like they're good and ready to go?
Dude, that's actually a really good point and a good question. Because I've kind of hinted at like almost the opposite, like that, like when you stop competing at your top level, that like your strength or fitness will probably decline. You're absolutely right. Like that's really not the reality for everyone. Um, and I think that like again, depending on the sport, and swimming is a great example of it. A sport that just loves to train. And I think the reality of like the time that it takes to like compete at a high level, once you get out of that system, like shoot, like dude, your body just needs a chance like to take a break and recover. Because like I'm not saying it's healthy in a lot of ways, and I'm peak at peak performing swimmers are like insane cardiovascular health. A lot of them very strong, very athletic. But there's other things like getting some lab work done that makes it like, holy shit, like yeah, your cortisol's through the roof, or um, yeah, you like whatever it may be, any sort of health issues or something like. I think there's a lot of merit into like taking yourself almost out of that like mentality and that structure and being able to actually optimize that or even be better off of something a little bit smaller, depending on like what the sport or activity may be. And a good point, I guess, going back to like my experience personally, like I said, like I was in like I did club weightlifting through college and still like competed at a decent level. I wasn't super. great, but at least my team was very great, and everyone I was training with and around were very good. But after I finished college, similar to you, like I went straight into an internship, and then I went into a few more internships for coaching. Then got my first full time job. And, kind of went through that series of climbing that ladder from a coach standpoint. And I think it was in March of like 2014. Um, I remember I snatched 111 kilos, um, which was a big PR for me at the time. And, and I'm coaching. I was at Mississippi State at the time. I think it was like 2019, probably. So about 5 years later. And like I've been working out for those 5 years, still doing stuff. And I look back and I was like, damn, like I haven't PR'd or gotten a personal best on any lift and done anything in 5 years now. And reality was like, yeah, I wasn't training as much. I was still training well, but like doing internships, trying to get into the field, like you're working 80 hours a week. And it's a selfless field. Any sort of coaching is like, you're working for the athletes you're working with, not necessarily yourself as the main priority. And I guess that kind of triggered something in me where like, okay, let me try to dial this in. And uh, a few years later, I guess several years later, like this past year, I hit three big PRs that I hadn't hit in almost 10 years, uh, and ran my first triathlon, which was never and still am not like an endurance athlete by any respect, but it's like that's 10 years after when I thought I was hitting my like theoretical peak, or when I was the one being coached and doing uh, what I was told, training more, doing this and that, and it doesn't always take that. And again, I kind of go, not necessarily go back on a lot of what I said, but like kind of go back on the way I framed it. That like uh, I think the reason I say that is because for the reality, like it's not like that for every athlete, uh, because they do just go into this like system of, okay, finish competing in college or high school, take however long like time off, get back to a little bit of working out, and then they're 10 years down the road, and I've only like gotten out of shape and haven't done what I need to do. But the reality is, if you do have that good structure, if you have a good coach, whether it's like an online coach or you have a good community, um, if you like work at like a CrossFit gym or something, or even just a wellness facility, if you have that, like that doesn't mean that you can't still continue to build and be your best self ever. Uh, Now, at some point, like we'll probably hit our theoretical peak in certain categories. Like I'm not going to run my fastest 100-meter sprint when I'm 80 years old. Um, but I can still be really good at something when I'm 80 years old. I don't know what it might be, but I'll continue to try to stay active. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, there's absolutely still room for improvement after you're done competing at a high level as well. The methods at which you get to that are probably just going to be very different than what you're used to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's going to take a different stimulus altogether. It's going to take a different plan, and you're regardless of where you fall in that spectrum. As far as like whether you're someone that has a sport maybe that doesn't cause like as much fatigue, or you're in a sport like swimming, somewhere in the middle between that 20 hours and no training is like the right place for each person. It's just kind of understanding where that line is, and that line, I think if you're trying to establish it yourself, it's easy to get a little bit like slippery with it. One of our clients, he's a former Olympian that we're working with, and he, like, the first 3 months we were working with him, like, built up, kind of struggled with motivation at the beginning, got moving, and then he was like absolutely crushing it. And he was lifting 3 days a week, and then he like, hey, can we move to 4 days? Like, yeah, absolutely, move to 4 days. And then all of a sudden he's like, hey, like, what if we go to 5 days and maybe we add in like one or two cardio sessions? And I was like, okay, like let's chill a little bit, but all right, cool. So we do that. And next thing you know, he's like wanting to go full on into this like crazy schedule. And I'm like, well, what are you training for? And he's like, well, nothing. And it's like he has that addicted personality, right? He was an Olympian where he's like, I'm committed to being excellent. But then when he boiled it down, it's like, what do you want to be excellent at? He's like, I want to be excellent at being like a father, be excellent at being a husband. It's like, man, then like you've succeeded from the fitness aspect of that. And now it's time to focus on the other elements of it. So it's important to kind of be able to draw that line and figure out like what that right balance is for the goals that you have at the time. And that can be peak performance, but also peak performance doesn't have to be just about training for a sport or lifting a certain amount of weight. Like peak performance can be showing up and being present as a family member or a husband or a father or whatever it needs to be. So it's definitely interesting how goals change as you get older.
Yeah, I guess this will be kind of my last point just to echo that. Like, I think the importance of still having goals is like paramount. Um, Obviously, like realistic and smart goals, but like we're not trying to, that client, I don't think he's trying to train for the Olympics again right now. But like, I still think it's important for that client or any other client or, any ex-athlete to still have goals for themselves. And because that doesn't have to be like, oh, I want to train for an Ironman and do this. It can be, I want to make sure like my blood work doesn't look like shit when I'm, in my 30s, or I want to make sure that, like, again, I just don't have pain when I crawl out of bed in the morning. Like, those are all very realistic, can definitely be done, and like still add a lot of value and benefit to wherever like that person's at prior to setting those goals. So I think the importance of setting that goal, that's what's going to dictate and help kind of kickstart that building of the structure to get some sort of a plan together. And I mean, it's then you're just kind of mimicking the same process of, well, when you're an athlete, my goal is to compete at the highest level. My goal is to win. My goal is to do this and perform this. And then here's the training and everything that's laid out for me that I need to be able to do that. And really, it's just your goals are changing. It's instead of I'm preparing for the Olympics, it's I'm preparing to be the best at the pickup basketball game at my rec gym, and I just need to run a couple times a week and not tear my ACL to be able to do that. And here's the plan that we're going to structure to put up to that. Like it doesn't have to be super advanced. It doesn't have to be super like even performance based, but just having the goal in general, I think, is that importance.
Yeah, for sure. You got to know what you're striving for to be able to actually make progress in that. I mean, that's thing we've talked about a lot on this podcast, like being able to know what you're moving towards. That way, like you know what to track. Like if you know actually what steps to take to move in that direction. Otherwise, if you don't know what you're doing or what you're striving towards, like you're never like you're meandering and you may make it somewhere, but it may or may not be somewhere you want to go.
No doubt, no doubt.
Cool.